Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. We're going to be talking about the TV programme, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch today. But first of all, I must apologise for the lack of new material that's been on the channel for the last couple of weeks. That is because I have been basically going through a lot of my old videos and putting it on BitChute. So all my entire catalogue eventually will be on BitChute in the next few weeks. I hope to achieve that. Some videos have needed re-editing, and now some of them are real gems. I really like a lot of my old work, but technically I wasn't as good a filmmaker as I am today. I've learned to do this job better, basically. So some of the videos I've edited together in different ways, and I corrected some of them because some of them have errors in. Now, some of the corrections I think are so radical, I decided not only to put the new version onto BitChute, but to replace the version that I had on YouTube to begin with. This is why you're seeing a series of older videos being re-uploaded under new designations. And I know some of you like that because some of you haven't seen the old videos yet, because you haven't gone through my old catalogue yet. Now, that's good because it means you now have the opportunity to see them in I think, an improved form. So I did a very, very radical re-edit of my Glastonbury Symposium video from 2010, and I haven't done it quite as radically as that this time, but I'm still putting up new videos and putting up old videos in the new form. I'd also like to add here that I am active now on Library. That's L-B-R-Y. That's like another alternative YouTube-like platform for video sharing. Library is looking quite healthy at the moment. There's a lot of active members. It seems to be quite stable. I mean, BitChute, of course, is another alternative of mine, which I'm backing everything up on. However, I like to hedge my bets when it comes to these things, even though BitChute does seem to be very secure now and it's not just going to fade away like VidMe or PewTube did. I have already uploaded a video to Library, which is a Library exclusive, so if you go there, check it out on the Herpanwo Radio blog. I have links to my Library account, so I hope to see you over there as well as over there on BitChute. This is a new video for July 2020 that is just coming out now. And it is about the secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Yes. Now, this is something that a lot of people have told me about, specifically Kev Baker, most of all, who you know I'm a regular contributor to his radio show on Truth Frequency Radio. Kev has watched this series and he really liked it, and he wanted me to watch it, and so we could discuss it on the show, and indeed I did, and we actually did discuss it on the last Kev Baker show I was on, which you can find on TFR Live. It will be in the archives. Now, I decided that I would also do a little video about it to expand on some of the themes that Kev and I brought up on that particular show. I think most people are familiar with Skinwalker Ranch. Now, this is a place in Utah, USA, which appears to be a massive hotspot for paranormal, ufological and associated phenomena. It's a 512 acre location, which is a livestock, a ranch, which is what Americans call basically a livestock farm, there's pasture land for the cattle and things like that, and there's a couple of little houses there. It seems like a lovely spot actually. There's a big mesa, like a big cliff or sort of like slope of rock leading up to a flat plateau. It's a very nice location. It was the people who run it. It started in 1905. A family called the Myers family moved in there and established the ranch, and they the family eventually sold it. I think the generations that followed it sold it to the Shermans. Now, it was when the Shermans got it that the main publicity surrounding Skinwalker Ranch first appeared in the media. This was in the 90s. I think the Myers' grandchildren or great-grandchildren probably sold it to the Shermans. Now, the Sherman family started reporting all kinds of strange phenomena there. And so this eventually came to the attention of Bob Bigelow, a famous philanthropist, who is he's a billionaire, and he's into the same sort of things that we are into. So he's like our George Soros, basically. And he had this organisation called NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Sciences. And they basically bought it off the Shermans. But I know the Shermans stayed on as like tenant managers for a while, because they knew how to run the farm in the best possible way. So Bigelow asked them to stay on as tenants, and they did for a while. But they basically, you may have read the book by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. Colm Kelleher is an Irish scientist who got involved in this. There's also a documentary about it, Hunt for the Skinwalker. And there's a rather naff movie. I've got it on DVD somewhere in my pile. I couldn't be bothered to dig it out for this, but it's a sort of like slightly trashy B movie. It's not that good, but it's based on the Skinwalker Ranch story. So they started doing these paranormal investigations there in the 90s, and they detected that what they found was some incredible things. Firstly, strange animals. Like there was a wolf or a dog or another canine-like creature that kept appearing. It appeared not to, but it's not a real dog. I mean, you could shoot at it and nothing would happen. It wouldn't be affected by the bullets. And indeed, this latest investigation, something similar happened. There were also Bigfoot-like creatures, if I remember rightly, and werewolf-like creatures. I think was that Skinwalker. I think so. And also UFOs. Cattle mutilations, lots of cattle mutilations, and a very strange case where what looked like a portal opened up in the air, like a tunnel in the sky, and this alien came down it, like a little grey alien, humanoid creature crawling down towards it. I mean, goodness me, that's quite something, isn't it? And of course, the NID study's been highly criticised by the Skeptics and everyone else, but I don't think it should be. I think this criticism is unfair. If you read the book or listen to the interviews with Kelleher and Knapp, you'll hopefully see that. You'll hopefully realise that too. That really there's a lot more going on here than I think meets the eye. I mean, basically, I think they put it down to some kind of fantasy or publicity stunt or something like that. But you know, Skeptics do that kind of thing. Oh god. Oh, a little digression. I was listening to Mick West on Joe Rogan Experience. He's done 2 shows, and it was terrible. Terrible. Mick West is a guy I locked horns with on YouTube a couple of weeks ago because he was slagging off the ATIP footage and saying he was saying it was an Airbus A130 airliner. And I said, come off it, Mick, you're joking. He wasn't joking. But we had a bit of a debate about that. Steve Mumbling loved that bit because Steve Mumbling actually chimed in at one point, I believe. I haven't checked his channel for a while, but anyway, what Mick West was doing was just the standard talking points, you know, the usual sort of thing. Now, the question is why, or if you, like I do, think that there's something interesting going on at Skinwalker Ranch, or the whole area around it. I mean, it's in a natural geographic anomaly, which is called the Unita Basin, and it's, as it's described, it's an area of lowland surrounded by highland in Utah, USA, and the actual phenomena we're talking about here, strange phenomena, actually predate the investigations. In fact, they predate the establishment of the ranch. They go back many centuries actually, and the reasons for them are unknown. However, there was something did happen there. I think about 400 or 500 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when, but it was a few hundred years ago, when the Navajo Amerindians, I won't say the word Native American, it's too politically correct. The Navajo Indians had a war with the Ute Indians, and the Ute Indians were the local tribe, and that's where Utah gets its name. And there was a big fight, and the Navajos ended up taking some of the Utes as slaves. Yes, it's not only white people who do that, you know. And as a result, there was some kind of curse put on the land. The shamans, the medicine men, put a curse on the land, and since then all kinds of strange things has happened. The term Skinwalker is actually an Amerindian one, and it refers to a shapeshifter. It refers to a dark shaman, a sorcerer, who has the ability to transform his shape into various other creatures, so he or she can actually disguise themselves as other beings and indeed channel dark energies. There's always the fear that people lost in the woods might be attacked by the Skinwalker. So the Skinwalker has a connotation of fear and sinisterness among the native peoples of the area. So it could be that what happens at Skinwalker now is connected to that. Now, what happened was, there's been a lot of questions raised over the ranch because, of course, eventually Bigelow sold it to somebody, and we never found out who. It was just kind of a secret thing. And then the Shermans moved out, and basically the ranch was sealed. There was the new owner put a couple of caretakers in there to help run it, but basically the area was sealed, and fences were put up around the perimeter, and there were security guards there, and everyone thought, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on? It turns out that, as I'll explain, as you'll find out in the course of this video, I think the reason that security was put on there was basically for the safety of the public. If anyone trespassed, either accidentally or on purpose, bad things could have happened to them. Anyway, last year it was revealed, astonishingly, that the new owner came forward. He came forward and announced who he was, and it was a local businessman called Brandon Fugel. Brandon Fugel bought up the ranch, and it turns out that he's very like Bigelow. He's got a lot of money, and he's interested in this sort of thing. So he could be our George Soros Part 2. You never know. I mean, he could be the second George Soros. So 2 versus 1. I think we're in with a chance. But Brandon Fugel had bought the ranch up, and he went public because he decided he was going to do some more experiments. Very, very much like the ones that were done by NIDS in the 90s. And he was going to see whether there was still any activity or not. Because it could be that it just faded away. I mean, these things happen. I mean, for example, you get flaps, like with the Point Pleasant incident, for example, which happened in the 60s, and is covered in the very, very good book by John Keel, The Mothman Prophecies. And I must say, what happened at Point Pleasant? Point Pleasant was in West Virginia, USA, and there was a lot of enormous similarities actually to what happened at Point Pleasant and what happened at Skinwalker Ranch. However, it seems that the Point Pleasant phenomenon was a temporary measure, although I know that some people claim that there's still strange things going on there. But the major activity, that is the sightings of humanoids, the men in black, things like that appears to have dissipated. And I think Brandon wanted to find out if that had happened with Skinwalker or not. That's the big question. So hence the new investigation, and it was filmed on a History Channel series, the same people who brought us Project Blue Book, called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And so I managed to get to see it at last. It's a bit of an oversight, I didn't see it earlier, but I did manage to get to see it. Now, the scientists turned up, the various researchers. These included some of the staff that already were on the ranch already, like the caretaker couple. There was a Tom and Candice, the couple, and then there was a couple of other guys who were the managers. One guy called Tom. Now, there's another guy called Tom, not the same Tom. An awful lot happened to him actually. I'll come to that in a minute. What happened to Tom? But there was also a guy called Dragon, that's his nickname, who was a security guard, and he had a couple of guards with him. And I must say, security was very tight for this whole thing. And these two guards, well, there was two. There was Dragon and Caleb, these two guards, and I think there was a couple more. They were tooled up. I mean, they went everywhere the scientists went. They went as well, and they were tooled up. They had like pistols on the hip. There was a rifle, shotgun, things like that. They were carrying these things around everywhere. They took security very seriously. And so therefore this 8-part series began. I do recommend watching it, I really do. There will be some spoilers in here, but I still think it's worth watching, even though I've told you a bit about what's going to happen. It's very sort of artistically made, lots of special effects, it's quite a high budget. It's made in that American style, so you notice that a lot of it is scripted, what happens, but it's obviously not fake. I mean, what was done there is real. You see like real people in it, and some of them are recognisable. I'll come to that in a minute, and identifiable. So it's not a mockumentary. It's not fake. I know that some of the skeptics are going to claim that the whole thing was staged, but it wasn't. It absolutely was not. It can't have been, because of the kind of people who were involved. And some of it is obviously spontaneous. I mean, it has like a score and things like that. So it's very different from the British style of documentary, which tends to be a lot more kind of fly on the wall. But I believe it's real. I do believe it's real. So they start investigating the ranch, and the first thing they find is this mysterious cave, because there's been some strange effects on the mesa. That is this. The mesa is a local name for like a steep hill with a flat top. You may know about the Dulce base is supposedly inside a mesa at Dulce, New Mexico. So M-E-S-A, I think it is a Spanish-derived word. So they went up to this mesa, and it's all bare rock. There's nothing growing there, because the previous night they'd seen beams of light shining up from it, and they'd seen strange glowing effects on the rock. It's like almost like a light is shining on it as well. Now, some of this was not visible to the naked eye. It was only visible outside the visible spectrum. For example, there's infrared and ultraviolet. I mean, they had all the gear in terms of research. They had cameras of all kinds. They had radiation detection meters. They had all kinds of other kinds of detectors, radio frequency detectors, electromagnetic field detectors, all that sort of thing, metal detectors, you name it. And the thing is, when they went down to this little cave, it's like a little cave, they immediately, strange things happen. Like Travis, one of the team, he started getting sick. He started feeling ill. Now you may know this guy Travis. He's I can't remember his full name, but he's done a couple of these sort of paranormal shows before. What's the weird thing about Travis is when he at the beginning of episode 1, like, he's the big skeptic, but literally by the end of episode 1, he's convinced something's going on. He is. So they're like, he suddenly starts feeling ill. He looks at his mobile phone, the battery's gone down on it, and the other guys look at their electronics, and the batteries are going down on those. Like the batteries are draining. This is a common effect in all kinds of paranormal phenomena. You get it in some crop circles as well, is that electronic instruments will fail in many, many ways. You see, like, for example, the classic is the car engine switching off when a UFO is around and the light's going out, the battery it's like the battery's gone flat, things like that. And the fact they were underground is interesting. Now, Travis, I should point out first of all that Travis is one of 2 members of the team who suffers some kind of bad effect more than once. He seems to be targeted with this. Now, it's the fact of the matter is that he almost faints inside this cave. He had to get out of the cave basically because he's fainting. He feels really faint. They're worried he might like collapse down there. They only go about 10 feet into this cave, and they can't see where they have to go. They could feel there's air coming through it, like there's a way through. They can't actually see where the entrance is, but they have to come out. Otherwise, Travis might collapse down there, and I'll have to carry him out. And he's a big guy, you know. Yes, they're all they're all white males, white men. Yeah, you know. I should point that out as well. Indeed, the core members of the team are all white men. But not, although other people get involved as well, as I'll explain. But you know, I'm glad the makers of this particular program resist the opportunity to become politically correct. So the thing about underground is an interesting thing, because there's something about underground issues which is important to Skinwalker Ranch. Now, the reasons why, there's a reason possibly why, but apparently there's always been a bit of a taboo connected with digging on Skinwalker Ranch, because like people who dig into the ground on Skinwalker Ranch, whenever that happens, bad things tend to happen to them. And one of the guys, Tom, before the program's even made, he goes into the ranch with a bulldozer and they do some digging, and he gets ill. I mean, really ill. He has to be rushed to hospital, and he has a life-threatening condition. It's really weird. I mean, the doctors didn't know what it was, but something weird happened to his head. At the back of his head, it's like they said it's like all the flesh separated from the skull in his scalp, and he was in a really bad way. The doctors were really worried about him. They really were, but that has made him concerned about digging, and indeed Brandon instructs them specifically not to dig on the ranch. So I don't know what the reason why that is. We can maybe find out. But anyway, they try to do some research into. There seems to be beams of energy coming down. I mean, the radiation detectors go nuts. They peg out, as they say, which means they reach the highest level of their measurement at various points, and no one seems to know why. And I just fiddling with the monitor because the screensaver kicked in, but the monitors are part of the lighting effect, just to let you know. But the presence of radiation is weird because this ionizing radiation appears in various forms. You get like X-rays and gamma rays and things at certain points, and there's also like they detect microwave signals from various points as well. It seems like there's all kinds of radiation across the spectrum in terms of frequency, wavelength, amplitude, everywhere. But it comes and goes. This is weird. But they try to do some studies using a balloon, and like a weather balloon. Ha ha. We know what the connection between weather balloons and UFOs, don't we? Well, they do. They get this weather balloon and they attach instruments to it, and they try to send it up because they reckon there's something up in the sky about 5,000 feet up, about a mile up. There's some kind of focus of energy in the sky because they direction find some of the rays that are attacking them. They actually direction find them to a point up in the sky. And later on they think there may be something underground as well. I'll come to that in a minute. I should point out something before I forget. Kevin Randall, I don't know if you listened to his interview the other day. He was on this X Zone, which is kind of like it's a paranormal UFO conspiratorial show, but it's sort of quite Fortean skeptic kind of position. It takes a very Fortean skeptic kind of position. Now you may have remembered, if you watch my last new video which is the one I did about the Bases Project, I refer to it there because he does an interview with Carol Noonan, which is awful, and I refer to it how I think the guy, Dan his name is, he's a Canadian guy, I think he is very unprofessional and dishonest in his interview with her, at the end, I mean, when he accuses her of being out to make a buck and things like this. Anyway, he had Kevin Randall on again. I mean, it's one of these things, I had to go and listen to a couple more of his shows. He had Kevin Randall on again. I mean, I don't mind Kevin Randall. I think Kevin Randall's very good in many ways in terms of his research. He's one of the first people, he appealed for calm when those Roswell slides appeared in 2015. He was one of the voices that appealed for calm, and I'm glad he did because he was proven right. But the problem with Randall is that sometimes he can be very negative, and I think excessively so. And you will know this if you followed my Project Blue Book reviews, because he was interviewed by I think it was the guy who does Somewhere in the Skies with Ryan Sprague. He was interviewed by Ryan Sprague on that show. That's worth listening to. I like Ryan's show. And he was going on about Project Blue Book, what was wrong with it. But what was wrong with it seemed to be like the nuts and bolts of the various props and things like that. It seemed to be like little details, like, oh, they got this badge on this uniform wrong, or things like that. And of course, it's understandable because Kevin Randall, he's a ufologist, but he's also a military historian. So he's going to notice things like that. But I did think, I did want at some point for Ryan to say to him something like, I would have said this if I was interviewing, all right, Kevin, you made your point, you know, they didn't employ you as a consultant like Paul Davids did for the Roswell movie. Maybe you got sour grapes about that, I don't know. Maybe they couldn't afford you. But the point is, like, what do you think, forget the details, what do you think of the programme generally? Well, anyway, coming back to The Secret of the Skinwalker, during this interview on the X Zone the other day, Kevin Randall was asked to comment on this series, and he said, that's a load of rubbish. Just like that, a load of rubbish. Nonsense, nothing. And I thought, That's not just wrong, I thought it's very narrow-minded. And it's a discredit to him, actually, that he took that position. Anyway, coming back to the balloon, they had some problems with the balloon, getting the right kind of the measurements they needed. They tried later with rockets. I'll come to that in a minute. But in the meantime, they go to what's called Homestead 1. Now this is the newer part of in terms of the buildings on the farm. There are two sets of buildings. There's Homestead 1, Homestead 2. Homestead 2 is the original buildings that were constructed in 1905 by the Myers. These were abandoned 30 years later, and presumably they moved somewhere else, maybe into Homestead 1. It's important actually to know that, because I want to know how old Homestead 1 is. But Homestead 2 was then abandoned, and it's now derelict, but it comes back into this story. It's very interesting. But in Homestead 1 there's something strange. This is the new farmhouse, which is active at the moment. It's where Candice and Tom live, the two caretakers. Went down. They've noticed strange noises coming from the house, as if it's haunted, like bangings and other sort of strange noises. And they seem to be coming from the basement. So the team goes down to the basement and they find something very strange. They find a secret room in the basement. It's got no doors or no windows at all. It's behind a 2-foot wall, a very thick cement and brick wall. And they go in there. There's this space. It's small. It's like about the size of my bedroom, and it's got no doors and no windows. You can't get in. You can't get out. First question is, why would someone do that? Why would someone construct a house, put a cellar on it, and just have this kind of like space? This useless space with no way in and no way out serves no purpose. And then it's really good because they drill a hole through this 2-foot thick wall and they put like a remote camera in there. It reminds me of the Gantenbrink study on the Great Pyramid. You remember that, where the guy sends the little robot up the shaft, up the secret shaft. It's very interesting, that. And they come across. Then they look around, they look down the floor, and there's some weirdest thing. There's like a pile of ashes, as if something's been burning there, and some bones. And they say they're not human bones. They actually managed to retrieve some of these bones, because they eventually dig a bigger hole and they can actually get into this secret room. But they found some bones down there. They take these bones out, they put them under the microscope and things like that in the command centre, which is where all their laboratory equipment is. It's where all the screens for the CCTV cameras and things, because there's CCTV cameras everywhere on the ranch. But these bones, they say they're not human. But then it's a bit frustrating, actually. This is one of the things that annoyed me about the programme, because, I mean, one of the few things, because it was a very good programme, but this bugged me a little bit. That particular story seems to end there, which is a shame. It's a great shame. I'd like to have known more. I'd like to, for example, known what these bones were and where they came from. Because the bones may not be human, but they may be something else, and it'd be nice to if they'd done DNA tests or something on them. And the question, of course, is how the hell did they get into that space? I wouldn't call it a room, because a room is like something you use in a house. This is just like a space. Like I said, there's no wall, there's no doors, no windows. And firstly, if a rat somehow got in there, how did it get in? Even rats can't go through solid walls. Well, a hamster did once. Well, that's a story for another time. I think I've told that story before anyway. Maybe on the Her Panwo Voice blog. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much. How did it get in there? How did these ashes, like the ashes of burning or cremation, how did they get in there? I would like to know how old that house is and how old that room is. I mean, was it established when the Homestead 2 was abandoned, which is like the mid-1930s? Or is it more recent? It's important to know more. I mean, this is where I hoped that the research would go, and it didn't. So maybe if they make a season 2, we'll find out more. I think there's signs that they're going to try more there, definitely. But anyway, they then decide to launch rockets up into the sky instead of using balloons to try and get the measurements they want at the altitude they want, at the focus of these beams of radiation. And they find out that there's very high levels of radiation at a certain spot. And they start talking about possibility that there's some kind of wormhole. They actually use the term wormhole. Now, a wormhole is basically something which involves transportation. It's a transportation or connection between one universe and another, or between different parts of the same universe. These are perfectly possible. I mean, they're accepted as being perfectly possible within conventional physics. I mean, they're known as the Einstein-Rosen bridge because old Uncle Albert himself first came up with them. The idea is you can make like a hole in the universe, and you can then connect to distant areas of the universe without actually going there physically. This is often used in science fiction as a way of it's like a plot device in science fiction, in order to get the spacecraft from one place to another very quickly, so avoiding the speed of light barrier, which means it takes thousands of years to travel like to the nearest star and stuff like that. Indeed, you may, whenever you hear that spaceships go into warp speed or hyperspace, you know, that's what it means. It's talking about going around a wormhole. Now, wormholes, of course, could also connect to other universes, parallel universes. And indeed, as I've already explained, in the original NID study, there's signs that that was happening. And it's possible that that is what was happening now. Indeed, I think it may be happening in other places as well. For example, CERN. I've done my entire video about CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. And of course this is sometimes blamed for the Mandela effect. So maybe that's happening everywhere on one level. But it seems to be happening particularly at Skinwalker Ranch. Now, following the rocket launch, several other people have experienced problems with electronics. One guy, one of the security guards, Caleb, his phone starts malfunctioning, and it's like his mobile phone just goes, suddenly it seems to be all the apps are activating at once and things like that. And then it gets even stranger. It gets even weirder, because they drive out to Homestead 2, and a lot of weird things happen there, because firstly Travis is struck by another bolt of radiation, and he has to go to the hospital. He's the second member of the team to suffer from some illness. Now Tom falls ill again earlier on. I should point out that Tom also has to go to the hospital because he feels ill, and because of his previous health conditions, they're very worried about him, because as I said, he nearly died as a result of digging on Skinwalker Ranch before the series started being filmed, and now he starts feeling ill again, so they say, get to the hospital, mate. And Travis has to go to the hospital too, and he experiences what the doctor thinks are signs that he had a massive radiation dose. And indeed, this is confirmed by the dosimeters, because what Brandon does is he gets them all to wear dosimeters. These are electronic devices which record the amount of ionizing radiation that you have. I know these things because the X-ray staff at my hospital used to wear them as well. These dosimeters are it record that Travis did indeed get. He was subjected to a beam of highly powerful ionizing radiation, not lethal, but enough to cause health effects on him. And of course, this is very dangerous. Even if it's not lethal, it can cause things like cancers, you know, in years to come, and things like that. A lot of the survivors of the Hiroshima bomb and Nagasaki bomb, for example, they and indeed things such as Chernobyl, nuclear accidents like Chernobyl and Fukushima, they got an initial dose of radiation which made them ill. Most of them recovered. Then a few years down the line, they developed various forms of cancer like leukemia and things like that. So it is very worrying. And so Brandon was absolutely certain. He brought in a radiological protection team to make sure everyone was safe. And he made sure that Travis went to the hospital and got checked over, things like that. But then when they went back to Homestead 2 and they walked around these ruined buildings with their measuring equipment, the team couldn't find any sign of radiation at all. They even opened up this old drain, which they thought might be where it was coming from, because Travis had fallen ill when he opened up this old drain, and they couldn't see anything in there. So seems to be now that is what's weird about it. It's the fact that the radiation just came and went. It shouldn't do that. That's not how radiation normally works. Very odd. Then they decided, because they couldn't dig. I mean, they asked Brandon if they could dig, and he says, no way, not after what's happened with other people who've dug on the ranch. Now the reason, it comes out later, they speculate later on, I'll bring this in now, they speculate later on that the that the beams of radiation might not be, the focus might not actually be in the sky above Skinwalker Ranch, but it might be in the ground underneath, maybe a mile underneath Skinwalker Ranch. There's a focus of beams to a point in the earth, which could explain why whatever phenomenon is there doesn't like digging. And I mean, this doesn't like people digging, and there's actually some sign, I think, indeed there's signs of this in other paranormal research that I've looked at, in and including like the Bempton phenomenon. I'll cover that later because I hope to interview Paul Sinclair at some point for her Panwell Radio. But and indeed, actually, go to my Hull video because I talk about that in the Hull video. But there's some sort of interaction between the researchers and the phenomenon itself, as if the phenomenon is something intelligent and it knows it's being watched. And for example, UFOs, I forgot to mention this earlier, sorry, a big white UFO appears in the sky twice, on 2 occasions, when they're launching rockets. Very strange, that. But what they decide to do is they say, okay, if we can't dig, what they decide to do is they decide to use ground penetrating radar and also soil resistance tests and things like that. So they bring in this geophysical unit to measure things under the ground through ground penetrating radar and this soil resistance. And you never guess what they discover. They discover some kind of what looks like an artificial object buried between 14 and 32 feet down, and it is saucer shaped or oval shaped. It's buried under the ground underneath the road near Homestead 2. Oh my god, there's no sign that anything's buried there. Everything looks normal, but it could have been put, whatever it is, if it is artificial, it could have been put down there a long time ago. And guess what, it's about 1,000 feet long. They measure the borders of it using this ground penetrating radar, and it's about 1,000 feet long. And so that's just too much of a temptation, so they say, look, Brandon, we need to at least drill down there. And so Brandon gives them permission to get this drilling rig in. But before they do it, this Ute Indian shaman comes in and he blesses them. He's cool. He's this guy. He comes in and he like does this prayer, and they all like bow their heads and things, and they get involved with it because they take this sort of thing very seriously, the team. Because, like I said, they start off as skeptics. A lot of them, and Travis certainly, but even some of the others say, I didn't believe in all this stuff before I came to the ranch. So they bow their heads and they allow this Indian shaman to bless them and bless their enterprise and bless the land. Because they're concerned, of course, that there is a supernatural element to whatever's going on here, and they're probably right. And then they bring in this drilling rig and it goes down, and they take core samples and they check them for radiation and things like that because they're worried about the dangers of it, which is fair enough considering. And then they eventually do hit something solid, but they can't drill through it. They just say, we're going to break the drill bit if we carry on. And again, they come up and they reckon they come up with some bedrock, and they think it might be the bedrock that's causing it. But of course, this does look like something artificial. And again, there's not a lot more they can do. I mean, this is the problem. That's where that particular line of inquiry ends as well. So like with the secret room under the Homestead 1, they have to end that particular line of inquiry there, which is a shame, but there's the opportunity for future research there, I think. I think at some point someone's going to bite the bullet and they're going to try and risk digging there to dig this thing up. Of course, it would be a massive excavation project. God knows what could happen. God knows how whether people will ill or get ill or even die. But they're worried about it. Now something else weird happens, which again ties in with the NID study. Weird creatures. Now, on this farm they have a load of cattle. They have 42 cows, but they also bring in these alpacas, who are like rather cute little creatures, and they're native to the Americas, and they are I don't know how you describe them. They're sort of furry creatures, a little bit like small camels. And they bring in 2 of these and put them on the ranch, and it's actually took an experiment to see how they respond, creatures other than cattle respond, because the cows, it's very interesting because the cows seem to be aware of things going on. For example, the cows go nuts whenever something weird is about to happen. They start bunching together, which is what they do when they're threatened, or they run around, or they go to a particular part of the field and things like that. And The alpacas, though, they have very good sight and hearing, apparently, but they're not very noisy. They don't make a lot of noise, so they don't moo like the cattle. But they keep these CCTV on these alpacas in their pen. But at one point, one early morning, the alpacas are attacked by something. And guess what? The main CCTV fails, and there's only a backup CCTV from a distance, which doesn't capture very much. But anyway, the caretakers go out and they find that one of the alpacas is covered in scratches, like some creature, some predator has attacked them. So they get the vet in, and the vet like patches them up, and it's like it's some kind of big cat or wolf or something. But they don't know what it is. I mean, this is a weird thing. It's like another of these kind of weird cryptids that appears on the ranch every so often. But they put the alpacas into somewhere a bit safer to keep them safe. But then other weird things happen. I should point out, I forgot to mention actually, during the drilling, the telegraph poles start wobbling at the side of the road. There's these telegraph poles running along the side of the road by Homestead 2. They start wobbling, and it may be the vibration from the drill, but it may be something else. It seems odd, doesn't it? And then other weird things happen, like a helicopter suddenly flies over the top of them. Now, it's obviously not. It's obviously like some kind of spy helicopter, because it has this big camera attachment underneath it, and it hovers over the Skinwalker Ranch, and it's staring down at them. It's an unmarked helicopter, just monitoring them. And I reckon it's like the CIA or something, because a lot of what's done at Skinwalker Ranch has been classified, and we know that Bob Bigelow was involved in ATIP. So from 2007 he was doing secret work for the government, which he never talked about because he was classified. He may well still be doing that, and indeed some of the stuff to do with Skinwalker Ranch was classified. And Travis actually mentions at the end of the video that he has been in contact with people from the intelligence agencies, and they've interviewed him. It's remarkable actually if this is all a load of rubbish, as Kevin Randall thinks it is. And indeed the official government position is, well, apart from the Trump statements that I mentioned in the previous UFO disclosure video, if the official line from governments are, well, we know people see strange things in the sky, most of them can be explained, and the tiny minority that can't, we're not going to bother with, because they're no defence significance, we're not going to spend time and resources on them, we'll leave it for all the tinfoil hat people, they make jokes about it. This is always the official line, official ridicule and denial. Yet, behind when they're making these statements, at the same time, they employ people like Nick Pope and many other people to study the phenomenon. They spend a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources on organising research into this phenomenon. And it appears that the NID study was one of these things. And it looks like the same attention is being paid to this new study, Brandon's study, which is covered in the secret of Skinwalker Ranch. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised to see there's a helicopter hovering over the top of the ranch spying on the team as they do their work. Then something else weird happens. A cow suddenly dies. One of the cows dies. Now, when they go and investigate it, they bring in Linda Moulton Howe. So she turns up, and now she's a person who's well known to everyone in the UFO community. She's one of the most famous researchers into the UFO paranormal conspiratorial subject that is in the world. She turns up to help them, and she investigates this cow death. Now she's the original publicizer of the cattle mutilation phenomenon. She made her film, I think 1978, Strange Harvest, when she was a young journalist. She started getting into all this sort of thing, and now she does Earth Files, as you know. If you watch that, it's well worth watching. But she turns up, and this cow didn't suffer the kind of injuries that we associate with cattle mutilation. So how did it die? That's the question. Well, it seemed to die at the same time that all the other cows took off and started running around and bunching up. The second time, because this happened more than once. And the vet came round and checked it over, and the vet found that this cow had died of shock. Now, cows do suffer from shock quite a bit. If something startles them suddenly, they'll just drop dead. I mean, in fact, when railways were first invented, this was back in the 19th century, a lot of farmers were complaining because their cows, when they built a railway through the countryside, all the farms near the railway, when the first train started running along, all the cows would suddenly start dropping dead at the side of the railway line. And the reason is because the trains were something that the cows had never seen before, and they were big, noisy, smelly things moving fast along between the fields. It scared the hell out of the cows, and they died. And what happens is stress, like emotional stress, causes the cow's immune system to drop, and very often you get like a bacterial infection into the lungs, and it forms a kind of pneumonia, and it's kind of toxic shock syndrome. And so eventually, of course, the cows got used to trains, and today they're not bothered by them because they all know what they are because they're used to them. But when they first started with trains, that's what happened, and it appears that this cow did experience something that caused it a lot of stress, and he just dropped dead. Now, when they go through the CCTV footage and they actually capture the moment where the cow dies, the cow actually tries to get to its feet to follow the other cows, and it just dies. Now, at that moment, a strange object appears in the sky. Now, it's like a saucer-shaped object. It's not like the white object they see when they're firing the rockets. It's like a saucer-shaped object, and it moves very quickly. They capture it on 2 frames, and it goes like that from one side of the frame to the other. Now, they say if it's at the same height of those trees which are in the frame, that's kind of a sign that it's... And I'll put the picture in one of the title slides. I'll put a still in one of the title slides here for this show. But if it's further away, of course, we don't know what the range on this object is, so we don't know what its size is or anything like that. If it's further away, of course, it's moving even faster. But at that moment, the cow dies, and Linda Moulton Howe, she claims that, well, she thinks possibly that this might have been a mutilation that was about to happen and didn't, possibly because of the presence of the CCTV and the team. Who knows? At the end of the study, they held a meeting in Brandon's office in Salt Lake City, the capital of Utah, or the biggest city in Utah. And a guy turns up called Sean Reyes, and they say he's the Attorney General of Utah. And they discuss various things. So, for example, they conclude that possibly that the Skinwalker Ranch area is a focus of some beams of energy, as I said, that go up into the sky or down into the ground in a kind of... So the bowl, the Uinta Basin, this dish-shaped depression in the ground, is one of either 2 things. It's either like a dish antenna, which you get like a satellite dish is, or it's a lens which is focusing energy from the sky into the ground. They're not sure which, but obviously this is something intelligent, and they talk about the possibility of making contact. That's incredible. I mean, Travis is really keen on this. And Travis is the guy, he said he'd been interviewed by the intelligence services. He didn't say what they told him or what they talked about. Possibly he signed a non-disclosure agreement, but something is obviously real about this. So Kevin Randall doesn't know what he's talking about. This is ridiculous for him to say that it's just nonsense, I think. Did he watch it? Did he watch the series? Maybe he should. If you haven't watched, Kevin, if you're watching me, go and watch the series before you make pronouncements about it again, because you may see more in it than you have this time. And Brandon says, you know, this kind of experiment could prove the kind of things that we all, people like me, are shouting in the wilderness about, which could alter our perception of our place in the universe, which is what I've always said, isn't it? Now, this guy Sean Reyes, I mean, he was this guy who came in, he was like a smiling chap. He had a kind of Amerindian look to him, I must say, in terms of his features. And I thought, this is interesting, because the Skeptics I think the Skeptics are already shouting from the rooftops, and they're shouting at the TV screen, saying, it's all staged, it's just an act. It's just fake, like that Stanley Kubrick documentary. They've just staged the whole thing. Well, I went and put Sean Reyes into Google, S-E-A-N-R-E-Y-E-S, and it turns out, no, he's real. He's the real Attorney General of Utah. And I saw his picture there on Wikipedia. He's got a wiki page. He is the Attorney General of Utah. Now, the Attorney General is a very important role, because he is basically like, he plays the role essentially that the Queen plays in Britain. That is the head of the prosecution, the service, you know, the head of the Crown Courts, as she is here. I mean, basically the Utah state courts, he's like the head of them. He's the one who decides what he's one of the head of what the prosecution is done with various criminal cases and things like that. You know, if you get into trouble with the law, you know, you have an interview with the police and they send it off to the Crown Prosecution Service and they decide whether or not to take action in court and things like that. Is it in the public interest? Things like that. They're the guys who decide this. So the Attorney General is a very important person in Utah. So what the hell would he be doing on a TV show which is about nonsense? Because he would know, oh my God, I can't get involved. If it was a load of nonsense and it was just some frivolity, some novelty mockumentary that had been produced, he wouldn't be on that, because he'd think, well, what the hell am I doing? What the hell am I getting involved in this for? What's this going to do to my reputation? The only reason he attended that meeting must be because he takes it seriously. And a man in his position taking it seriously. And of course we've seen this more and more and more. I mean, what did Trump do the other day talking about Roswell? You've seen my video, my last disclosure video? So this is what I mean when I talk about how the way UFOs are portrayed, the way the phenomenon is portrayed in the mainstream milieu has transformed since December 2017. It is totally flipped, and it's universal, it's everywhere. And it's now, I reckon before 2017, someone like Sean Reyes wouldn't be seen dead taking part in a documentary like this. And indeed Trump wouldn't have said what he'd said. I think this is very important. I mean, if they go back and they make, you know, obviously they have twigged that this phenomenon is responding to their presence there, which is a form of communication. So are they going to go out there and try and make contact with it? I mean, I'm not talking about Stephen Greer with the C5 protocols and things. I doubt if he'd be allowed onto the ranch. I mean, I haven't actually seen Greer talking about Skinwalker very much. I don't think he's even mentioned it. But obviously if that happens and there's people like the Attorney General of Utah involved in it, then it is a kind of moving. What's that phrase that Ryan, UFO Jesus, talks about? We will move into a post-disclosure world. I can't do an impression of him because I don't have the hair and the beard, but he says things like that. So, well, could it? I mean, obviously, if there's like an official investigation which involves communication with some kind of entity, is that not the definition that Steve Bassett gives of a frank and full admission that there is an extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race? I mean, surely that counts, doesn't it? Surely that counts as disclosure with a big D. I mean, I think it's as significant as the saucer and the hanger thing, isn't it? Or not quite, because it doesn't involve the lying sort of thing. The lying side of things doesn't come out. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a kind of SETI plus. If you remember my search for extraterrestrial intelligence video that I did, I've done 2 of those now. So it's not quite the same as the saucer and the hanger, but it's the next best thing. Come on, it's the next best thing, guys. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I will be keen to watch it. If there's another season of this, I'll be keen to watch it. Yeah, I really will, because along with Project Blue Book, I think this is like one I'm going to keep an eye on. This is a series I'm going to be watching very carefully to see what happens. So if you want to watch it, it can be found at various locations, both legal and illegal. So I'm not going to put any links to illegal stuff or anything like that. You can find it. It is available legally. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch by History. Yeah. Do please check it out, because I think you'll find it interesting. And I'm going to be keeping an eye out to see if there's a season 2, if there's any more that comes out about this. And indeed lots of other things associated with this. I mean, this is an incredibly exciting time to be a ufologist. I can't think of any time in history that it's a better time to get involved in this business. It really is, I think, revolutionary. It is world changing. These are world changing and attitude changing incidents. Definitely. Alright guys, who knows what's really going on there in places like Skinwalker, but there are other places like it. You see, there's like Bempton. I must do some more on that actually. I've got Paul Sinclair's video that he's made, his DVD. Maybe I should do a review of that because it's very good. He's written a couple of books as well, so I'll be interviewing that guy soon, I hope. And there'll be more material coming from me very soon. I do have plans for more new material, so hopefully this little hiatus is over, and I will be bringing more videos to you as soon as possible. And also, of course, I'm going to Truth Seekers Northeast again, the weekend after next, and if you can't get there, don't worry, because I will be doing a recording of it, but of course that's not the same as being there. But if you want to go to that, incidentally, go to her Panwo Voice, because all the details are on her Panwo Voice blog. I'm not going to repeat myself here. You could just go to panwo-voice.blogspot.com, and I've got all the details there, and you can I'll hopefully see you there. But I will be filming it as always, and there's a couple more things I want to do. Oh yeah, I've got to do Pandora's Promise. I promised I'd do a review of that film, and I will. That's going to be very interesting. And also the issue of whales has come up again. Not the creatures that swim in the sea, the country where I come from, Boyle. Yes, I'm going to do a special video about that very soon, hopefully before I go to Newcastle. So stay tuned, lots more to come. Thank you for watching her Panwo TV, everybody. Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.